Oh yes, there was a time. No, my name is Steve Guttenberg, and this is the Audiophiliac Daily Show. And this is actually, well, a rave review of the Physic Tempo 35. Well, the thing that jumps out right away, I'm going to just cut to the chase early here. The thing that jumps out about the sound of the speaker is the way it images. It just throws this huge image with great depth, layered depth, and just very sharp specificity. And it's remarkable. You know, it's closer to the sound of a panel speaker, like a Magnepan, in the way a Magnepan has scale and size. And that's what this does. And it's a skinny speaker. You know, it's not that big. And yet it projects this huge image. So that shook me up right away. And I remember being similarly impressed in the 90s when I first heard Audiophysic. It was a Virgo speaker, and it did the same thing. So they've been perfecting this magic of how their speakers image for a long time. Actually, the first Tempo, which wasn't a tower, it was a stand mount, came out, I think, in 1986. But this one here, yeah, fantastic imaging. And I think a lot of the better speakers today image well, but not like this one, no. So I was in. Now, I mean, there's a lot of other things that the speaker does very well, but it was the imaging that was the hook, because I am an imaging freak. I love great imaging speakers. Now, this speaker is made in Germany. Audiophysics is a German company, always has been. They use proprietary drivers. They call them the tweeter and mid-range are called hyper holographic. These names sometimes seem sort of silly. But I'll tell you one thing about the tweeter. It's not a dome tweeter. Now, it looks like one. I'll show it to you now. It looks like a dome tweeter, but it's actually a cone tweeter, 39 millimeters in diameter. So it's bigger than the average tweeter, which is usually 28. The mid-range is, I think, aluminum. It's 6 inches, has a big chunky aluminum phase plug that also serves as a heat sink. And that mid-range driver is decoupled from the cabinet. Now on the sides, there's push-pull 6.7-inch woofers. There's a lot of technology. I just can't go through it all here, but it uses ceramic foam bracing. The cabinet is very light. Well, not very light, but it's light, but very, very rigid. So I am very impressed with this speaker's build quality. Round back, there's a single set of binding posts and a small bass port. Oh, the price. The price is $7,995 a pair in the US for those finishes that I told you about: white, black, ebony, and walnut. So yeah, I love the shape of the cabinet. It's sort of wide hips, narrow front. Nobody else really makes speakers in this shape. And because it's so skinny, the speaker sits on outriggers to make it more stable. And instead of using spikes, it has isolation dampers on the bottom of those outriggers to, let's say, decouple the speaker from the floor. So if you push on the speaker a little bit, it kind of wiggles a bit, just a bit. Oh, specs. Well, it's a 4-ohm speaker, 89 dB sensitivity. And, well, I'll put up all the specs right now for your perusal. My mainstay amplifier for most of this review was a fairly low-powered amplifier, the first Wat F8, but I also used the past Labs XA100.5, which is 50 watts into 4 ohms, and also the big past Lab XA100.5s, which are 100-watt monos, because I felt like, well, maybe the sensitivity isn't that great. Maybe I should put a lot of power into them with the big monos, but I didn't really feel like I needed to do that. I wasn't playing them crazy loud. So the XA100.5 and the F8 were the mainstays. But I also experiment with using a 300B amplifier that was, I think, rated for 9 watts a channel, just to see what would happen, which is called the L-Kit 8600R, which I will review shortly. It played pretty loud, but what I was missing with the higher powered amplifiers was dynamic energy, kind of drive to the sound wasn't as good as the higher powered amplifiers. I should also mention that I found these speakers fairly fussy about placement. I had them wide, but in terms of their toe-in, not much toe-in, basically so they were crossing behind me a bit. But every time I moved them, they sounded a little different. So be prepared, if you get these speakers, to invest the time finding just the right spot for them. And when you do get just the right spot, they will reward you with even better imaging. You know, you look at a speaker like this, skinny, you don't think it's going to have much bass. Well, when I was playing Philip Glass's score to Powakatsi, it's a movie, and at some point there's like these sort of like rhythms, you know, like tribal rhythms, and then there's this big bass and big bass drum, and the impact of that on LP, by the way, was one of those, whoa, this speaker is fast. I mean, the bass isn't just like a big thick blob. No, the bass is clean, articulate, phenomenal definition on the bottom end. So yeah, but before I go any further, yes, I do have these clipped Cornwell speakers here with a big 15-inch woofer. Those are much bigger speakers, and yes, they do sound much bigger and much, well, heavier. Big, you know, they have more brawn to the sound than these speakers, than the Tempo 35s. But the Tempo 35s are more nimble, and their overall sound, I would say, is a bit more refined and pure and transparent. It's definitely a higher resolving speaker than the Klipsch. Now the Klipsch Cornwell 4s are certainly more dynamically alive. When I play rock music and I want to play it fairly loud, oh no, the Cornwells are much better speakers than these. But these speakers have great transient response. And as I said, the bass impact and definition is really, really nice. But it's not like a big speaker. If you want really big speaker sound, buy a really big speaker with a 15-inch woofer. That's what I recommend. But my job here is to tell you what I'm experiencing with these speakers. And what I was experiencing kept bringing joy to me, right? I kept grabbing another record, grabbing another CD, because I wanted to hear what it would sound like over the Tempo 35s. Before I get to more music examples, I have to say that the Klipsch is also a better late night speaker. I can play the Klipsch Cornwell 4s really, really quietly and still hear some dynamic life to the sound. And when I played the Tempo 35 very quietly, I always wanted to turn it up a little bit and turn it up a little bit. That's also a difference in the way these speakers work and how they fill a room. Now, as for the music, one of the things that passed through my CD player, Jay's Audio CD Transport, was this record called Bob Dylan 1970, which it's kind of a dopey, slapped together outtakes of the music he was making in 1970. But one of the things that's great about this recording, it's actually 3 CDs, is that it's basically raw mixes. You just hear Dylan, you know, with guitars and other musicians and stuff, but it's pretty straight ahead. And to hear the timbre of his voice and the timbre of the acoustic instruments was really, really good over the tempos. Very, very, very impressive. Speaking of that sort of thing, this new 50th anniversary of John Lennon's Plastic Ono Band album, which was his first solo record. Well, it's got a lot of music, a lot of outtakes and things I never heard before. But there's one track called Mother, that's one of the songs on the album. But there's this one where you hear John working on the arrangement with the other musicians, and you hear his frustration because he's relatively inarticulate and telling them what he wants them to do. So he's struggling through it, and they start to play, and it's basically a raw mix. And the bass instrument sounds so good and so real and so right there, and so do the drums. And John, without reverb on his voice, because usually when you hear John Lennon, there's a lot of reverb on his voice. But here it is, just John. And this song, which is about his mother, it's called Mother, is kind of tortured, and he really is screaming. And John is, or was, a great screamer. He just lets it all out. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about how great it was to hear him in the process of creating this music. And it sounded so good, and so you're in the room. The cliche, you're in the room with the musicians. You're in the room with John Lennon figuring out how to make this music. I'm playing this LP. I'm playing this LP, The Yellow Dog Blues, recorded in 1959, early stereo recording. And it's kind of like the John thing, that there's an immediacy to it. This stand-up bass sounds so there, so woody, it's a wood instrument. And the trumpet transients on this record are so good. It's captured so well, and you wonder, like, so what did we learn in 60 years since 1959? It's like, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better sounding contemporary recording than this one made in 1959, because they weren't mucking around with the sound. They weren't doing stuff to the sound. It was just, they were capturing instruments and making music. And it's kind of old-timey jazz, not old, not like 1920s jazz, but it's just kind of a nice feel. And the rhythm of it was very well played over the tempos. They definitely get your body moving, your feet tapping. It's a very engaging sound. What I've described up to this point is with the past Labs and first watt amplifiers. But when I put in the L-Kit 8600R 300B tube amplifier, the imaging just got even bigger. It bloomed. It was even more expansive and yet very nicely defined. Again, this amplifier is not a mellow, mushy sounding tube amplifier. It does great on rhythm and pace and transients and all that stuff. So all that I liked about the sound of the Tempo 35s was even better. Well, not everything, no. The bass impact and the bass power and all that stuff was not better over the 8600. But in terms of the musicality of the sound, the believability of pianos and guitars and acoustic instruments and all that stuff, it was pretty enticing. Now, again, there are limitations in terms of dynamics and ultimate loudness, but I was pretty happy listening to the L-Kit 8600R. Now, I will be doing a separate review of that amplifier pretty soon. For a change of pace, I played this early Kraftwerk CD, which unfortunately I don't think you can stream on Tidal or Qobuz, but you can hear the whole album on YouTube. And I recommend you do. If you're interested in early electronic music from the early 1970s, early Kraftwerk wasn't so, it's not like a dance record or a driving beat. It's more ambient, it's more textured. It's more about really cool early electronic sounds. This record is so beautiful. And the tempos were really zeroing in on what this music was all about. You just like listen into it. You listen closer and closer because you just feel like, wow, that is so amazing. Yeah, this has been a review of the Audio Physic Tempo 35 speaker. Now, I review a lot of speakers. Many of them I instantly forget because they're not that memorable. They're good speakers. It's actually hard to hear really bad speakers anymore. There's not that many of them. But good speakers, they're plentiful. But speakers that speak to you in a different way, they reach you in a different way, like this one does, the Tempo 35. Yes, I will never forget playing the speaker. Like I didn't forget listening to the Audiophysic Virgo in the 90s. It was something that stayed with me. Speaking of the long haul, my name is Steve Guttenberg, and this continues to be the Audiophiliac Daily Show. If you like what I do here, please consider subscribing to this channel. Hit that button right down there. When you do, hit the bell so you'll be notified every time there's an amazing new episode, just like this one. Beyond that, I can tell you should check out the Patreon, which can be found at patreon.com/audiophiliac. If I said that too quickly, there's a link to that in the description below this video. But after that, I can tell you I have playlists, many playlists, starting with speaker reviews and headphone reviews and electronics reviews and music reviews, plus interviews with so many cool and interesting people like Frank. This one is pretty recent, but Frank made a huge impression on me, and I've been eating at his restaurant called Frank for 20 years, and to meet the man and do this interview was really a peak experience of late, because he'd been double vaccinated, I've been double vaccinated, so we could do it without masks. I could be in his place, see his really cool loft, talk about food and music, and just, the guy's just a joy to be around. So anyway, if you missed that interview, I'll put a link to it right there. Check it out. And now I can say, as I love to say, my work here is at last complete. Thank you again for watching, and I really do hope to see you back here again very, very soon. Bye-bye.